This is in Convos with Danae. It's a space for exploring life's questions through introspection, intellect, investigation, insight, while finding inspiration. Here's to growth and change. Now, let's go in. And we begin. In. I decided on the name of this podcast. It came from multiple conversations that I've had with myself and with others around the origins of our ways, our traits. And for me, I'm a little bit obsessed with what we consider success, how we define it, how we come to know that we've achieved it, and how we tick. You know, social media is very much obsessed with, you telling your origin story, especially when you're doing, vlogs and so on. But for me, it's always been about origin moments, because I feel like there are numerous moments, numerous defining experiences, numerous, whether it is fears, tussles, joys, that shape who we are, shape how we function in the workplace, shape how we function in relationships, and shape how we behave with ourselves. And of course, my biggest origin, I am a born Jamaican, and which, for me means coming from a place with a rich tapestry, culture, music, food, and of course, a resilient people. That identity we will explore further. But as we go in today, I want to talk about origin moments, and I'll use me as a test case. So I believe that there are some things that impacted me, some of them light and some of them more intense. And I want to share with you because I think we can learn from them. The first one I want to share as an origin moment is what I would categorize under never too sick. So, we have this thing in Jamaica where you're never really too sick. I don't know if it's because it's a culture where we didn't have a lot of moments where you're allowed to take sick days. A little bit different here in Canada. Or it was just around, our post-slavery trauma where you don't really take a day off. Our ancestors worked and toiled without one. And so I don't know if that's written on our DNA or whatever, but we don't take a sick day. How did this play out for me? As a child growing up, I had asthma. I was born with asthma. It was severe at times. Like I had to, go to the hospital, go to the doctors, be on medication. And anybody who knows anything about asthma, that we have like a situation, you're either on the puffer or you're on pills that we call Ventolin. And I was on both because that was the severity. And so I remember distinctly one day, I am in what is elementary school age for you that are listening in North America especially. And I was sick. To me, I was deathly ill. The worst case of asthma attack I've ever had. And, I'm not going to make it. I distinctly remember telling my family members that I am sick. I am not going to be able to go to school and so on. That is a no-no. I distinctly remember my family members saying to me, here, see a Ventolin and see a puffer. Have a good day at school. Take them and be all right. And I went to school extremely ill. Nobody saw fit to keep me home. Because when you think about it, who's really going to stay home with me? Everybody has to go to work. But that little moment became a defining origin moment. It was the origin of me not being careful about illness, me not being careful to take my sick days. I like, you can check me every year. I have days left over. And it's not that I wasn't sick, but I became that person who goes to work sick. I became that person who works through sickness. I became that person who has fun through sickness. I've gone on vacation sick and still gone out and done all the activities because I'm never too sick. Defining origin moment one. Another origin moment for me, which is, more near and dear, is how I come to be in front of you now. It's you have a voice. Where does this idea come from for me? So growing up on the island of Jamaica, there's something that we joke about as Jamaicans, is that we have the most churches per square mile. And if you're really a good insider, you'll know that we also have the most bars, and they're usually near a church. So we're always taking part in some kind of spirits. In any case, I grew up, of course, Christian. It's the majority religion in Jamaica. And I grew up as a Seventh-day Adventist. And I've been going to church from, I think, about age 3 with my grandmother. How does voice come in? I was an early reader, a confident reader. And if you know anything about churches, if they know you can read, you are going to be set up to read. And so it started there. I was, reading texts in church, whether it is in small groups or out in the open and so on. And I also became a part of drama groups. I became a part of, different experiences that were all church related, but all called upon me to use my voice. And I remember clearly, almost as day, the first time I heard my voice bounce back to me on an amplified system, on a microphone in the church. I had what could only have been a moment, an outer body moment, where I was like, is that me? Now, to give you a little bit more context, I was raised on radio and television later, but radio. Radio was a big deal for me. I've spoken about it in TEDx, all of it. Radio was, what I've worked in and so on. I loved me a good radio voice. I love the greats in Jamaica, the Doreen Samuels, the Norma Brown Bell, may Doreen rest in peace. And those voices for me were formidable. Those voices transcended time and space. Those voices pulled you in. When I heard my voice on a microphone, in a split second, I thought to myself, could I have what they have? The people I revere? And, needless to say, I've, spent a lot of time doing work with my voice. I hosted events in Jamaica. The first wedding I hosted was one of my friends in Jamaica. The first concert I hosted was a gospel concert in Jamaica. And these were all before I got to the age of 20. And round about age 19, 20, I signed up for courses at CPTC. Which was an institute that does, all these, media production, and they offer trainings. And I signed up for voice and speech training with the great Wycliffe Bennett. He wasn't a big fan of mine, I gathered, but I learned so much in that process. It is where I learned my interest in language, in linguistics particularly. So in any case, I, from then, became hellbent on being a broadcaster. I was sure that that's what I'm going to do. It is my calling. It is my thing. My voice must be heard. And I got validation along the way, from church events to, going through that course and successfully getting through it. Got some bumps along the way, which we might talk about as we go through this process. But distinct origin moment. Here I am in front of you with a microphone again, and it is because of those origin moments. I've gone on, I come to Canada, studied broadcasting because it was a must, and gone on to run a radio station, converted with my team that radio station to be a media hub, which is a social enterprise and more. All from a little spark in a church on a mic. Origin moment. Another origin moment for me, which, you can take it how you wish, is where I started to understand myself in the bigger context of being woman, and in a bigger context of what people would call feminism. And later I would identify as a womanist. The term womanism emerged from Alice Walker's work, where she did a piece called In Search of Our Mother's Garden. And that's where the term kind of surfaced. And it was really a way of expressing how Black women, Black female energy, Black female experiences, Black female socioeconomics, Black female politics, Black female entire experience actually impacted them in what would have been the feminist space. And what is more clear is those who identify as womanists identify that we were missing from overall feminism. The famous words from Sojourner Truth, "Ain't I woman?" came from that realization when they were having meetings about the right for women to vote, the suffragettes. And she realized that the Black woman was not who they were fighting for. So those moments, pushed together multiple theorists to understand ourselves as Black women in a different context, and hence womanism. Now, this sounds all nice and highfalutin and clearly, calling upon some of my degrees. But there was an origin moment for this. That origin moment was in my home as a child. I used to observe something and actually participate in something that to this day still makes me cringe. We used to cater to, in Jamaica we say pet and powder, my granddad. May he rest in peace. But my granddad, in my estimation, was not worthy of the treatment he got. Let me break that down for you. So my granddad was a heavy drinker to the point where I don't drink because of, some of that. Another, moment. And he was also a womanizer. This meant that he was never home on time. Never home in time for dinner with the family, because he would be doing his exploits, finish work. He would go hang out with the guys at the bar. He would go, maybe by a friend or by a woman, whatever that was. And he would get home easily close to, sometimes close to midnight on a work day. However, we would wait and we would prepare for him a warm meal. And that meal was kept warm, like in a container. We call those carriers or shot pan. You can look up these terms. They're real. So we would wait till around the time we estimate he should get home, or when we hear his truck coming down the street, we would rush and warm up this shed pan. So what the carrier allows is for you to have layers. So it was a 3-stack, and you have layers of food. And in those layers, at the base, you would have, whatever ground provisions with water, boiled water. In the middle, you might have some cooked veg or rice, and at the top, his meat. My granddad would get a hot meal after coming home drunk, messed up, a hot mess. And not only a hot meal, he would be catered to. We're spreading the table like he's king of the house, and we're doing the whole thing. That never sat well with me. Add to that, he was the one who was very prone to beating. And add to that, he was the one who spoke to us like we were actually his servants or pets. I remember him distinctly saying stuff like, go fetch me a glass of water, and so on. Literal origin moments for me. Because in those moments, even as I participated, even as I was mad as hell to do it, in those moments, I distinctly said to myself, never that. When I get old enough, I will never cater to a man in these ways. Now, is that toxic? Does that affect anything? You tell me, you can tell me. But a lot of people who listen to this will be like, hey, that's why she's single. Whatever you want to say, again, it's an origin moment. So stick a pin on that one. Last moment I want to share with you is hard is sometimes soft below. I grew up in what some people call the ghetto, some people could call a hood. I actually think we were hood adjacent or ghetto adjacent because our street, before it went bad, our street was great and was, we're smack in the middle of, some tumultuous areas. For context, look up Kingston 11. But I grew up in that area, and I will tell you that as an origin moment is identifying that you have to have a tough exterior. You have to stand your ground, hold your fort, because you will be set upon by so many things. In particular, what would, impact you are, there were instances where people, men and women actually, were harassing you, especially if you're younger, especially as a female. You were high risk in these areas. And, maybe one day I'll flesh that out more for you, but let's just say I had to hold my own. And I remember distinctly being set upon by some women in the area. These were women that, I guess now you would call them ladies of the night, but they weren't they weren't officially that. They were just women we know. They didn't have a formal job. They slept in, and at night they were gone in, what we call pretty cars and Chris cars. And I remember being cornered by them because I used to try to avoid them. Again, being firm, I would still avoid them because under my hard shell was a soft person. I was afraid, deathly afraid, petrified of them. And I remember I used to walk on the opposite side of the street to avoid them. And one day they came on the side I was walking on, swarmed me, and we had an altercation. Won't go into the details. I was firm as could be. But I distinctly remember, it's almost like yesterday. I remember one of them saying, she thinks she nice because she goes school and she going to work. She thinks she nice. And, to translate for those who, don't know, I'm going to use my parlance, but to translate is, because of perceived privileges that I had, they also perceived that I thought I was better than them. I wasn't, I didn't think so, but anyway. But their hard exterior had a soft. So despite them swarming me, and listen, I can only come to this realization now that I'm older. At the time I was petrified, at the time I was pissed off. But now I can come to the realization that they had fears under that hard exterior. So why do I go through these stories for you? And trust me, there are many more. It's because I really, really, really believe that these are all origin moments that have shaped the person who I am. They've determined my, status in relationships and how I interact with others at work or at play. They have shaped my idea of what is success. And all of them I've had to interrogate over time. And what I want us to do through the process of is to look in at these instances, these origin moments, and ask ourselves, do they serve us well? These traits that we think are just norm and our behavior is how it is. Can we have a conversation about whether or not they serve us well? Added to the conversation about whether or not they serve us well is the conversation about, can we change? If we identify that they're not working for us, if we identify that they're not good, can we change? And if we identify that they're good, how do we harness that energy? How do we harness that realization? How do we harness those skill sets that come from these origin moments? I know we can continue this conversation, and it may be hard for you to just hear one voice, but I want to encourage you to stick with me. I want to encourage you to continue the conversation with me online and listen out for other conversations like this as we go